Live on Lockdown, episode 2, proudly brought to you by Total Agri. Thanks for joining us once again as Total Agri brings us live in lockdown episode number 2. Episode number 1 was all about meeting Sandra Labuscagne. Now we start to meet the ultimate racing chick. It's been a pleasure to work with her the last couple of seasons and get to know her. Now we're going to get to know her even more. Sandra Labuscagne join us as our second guest. Welcome, Sandra, and thanks for finding the time during this crazy period we're going through.
Hi, Matt, and thank you very much for having me on the show, and welcome to my home. As you've said, it's been a bit of a crazy period, and I never thought I would be the one to say it, but I'm actually missing dust and missing mud and definitely missing racing and my extended racing family out there.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a strange time, messed around all of our calendars and everything, but I know you've been extremely busy during this time. In fact, you've been turning some of your skills towards some of the problems that we've been having out there in the world, hey?
Yeah, so Matt, unfortunately, I haven't had much of a downtime during this lockdown period. As a veterinarian, I've been fully out there trying to service the community. And we've especially found that during this time, a lot of dogs and animals have been neglected. As you know, there's a lot of financial constraints out there. And unfortunately, they're just not a priority. That's the tough part. For me. So I qualified as a veterinarian a few years ago. I studied at motorsport in Pretoria. And, I'm very fortunate to be one of those few people that can actually say that, every day that they go to work, they do what they love and what their passion is. And luckily for me, it pays the bills as well.
And this is the whole theme as well. Obviously, like episode number 1, we talked to Kutsira and got a little bit of his background and his lifestyle. But with you, we're going to take a slightly different approach. I mean, we want to know about the woman behind the steering wheel, behind the notepad, behind the helmets. And I suppose that's kind of like the starting point of this whole thing, because, you didn't start life. You didn't arrive on this earth as a racing driver or a navigator. So where did it all start? Because, you start to look for a certain kind of person that wants to look to go into motorsport. So where were the true groundbreaking beginnings?
Well, Matt, if I have to think about it, I guess it's definitely due to my dad. Since I can remember, he was in motorsport. So for me, my dad was definitely one of the reasons I got into the sport. And if I look back at those days, I definitely didn't go into the driving seat immediately. I kind of came up through the ranks, as my dad would say. I started out being just on the sideline when he was racing, and I was very fortunate to actually be a part of the entire team, whether it was on the technical side. I've got very fond memories of myself, as a young girl lying under the car they were racing at that stage, which was a Hilux Bucky. And, I was lying under the car, and one of my favorite things would be to actually put Loctite on every single bolt under the car. So I've got very fond memories of back then, and I really enjoyed, coming up through the ranks. Like I've said, it's given me a big advantage in my racing career, because that taught me a lot of technical skills, actually. So, I got an opportunity to be with when they're building the car, to work on the car myself. Which is great, because not a lot of female racers out there can actually say that they do have those technical skills as well. And then lucky for me, I also got a lot of experience being their team manager at one stage. And that got me to learn a lot about all the different skills there is to racing, and not only focus down on the driving or navigator position and how it is in the car. And then about 13 years ago, I started racing with Dad. and then also started racing my first national season with Michiel Nel, who was one of the guys who actually won the special vehicle championship. So what a great opportunity to learn from someone like that, and a bit of old school racing, as I'd like to put it out there. So and then very fortunate, I got into the car with my dad for a few years, and as his navigator, which we loved, and it's such a great thing to be able to spend this wonderful time with your dad in the car. And also luckily for me then, or not so lucky for my dad, he unfortunately had to go for a knee replacement op, and that is when I got my first shot at being the driver in the car. As you guys can see, that one photo is definitely not something you want your dad to see when you're driving his car out there. And I remember that race very clearly. It was Glen Harvey was my first race ever as a driver, and that was actually in the time trial. And when I got back to the pits, I thought, okay, I'd better own up to what happened. And the first thing I said to my dad is, I made a mistake. I hit the hole a little bit too hard. But I guess I didn't give him the full picture until he saw the photos later on. So
yeah, and then we all saw the video footage later on as well.
Exactly.
And you hit that thing proper hard.
Yeah, that's unfortunate about the sport. There's always someone there, getting evidence, unfortunately. So, but yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm very fortunate to have had that opportunity. And also my dad to have trusted me to put me in the car. I've never driven it before, so that just shows his faith in me as a driver as well.
I think a lot of people that come into the sport think that everyone's born with a silver spoon, and as soon as you could walk, you were racing a go-kart or a motocross bike or something like that. But it wasn't like that for you, wasn't it? It was actually quite late in the day when you got into motorsport.
Yeah, Matt, definitely. It wasn't like that at all, and to be honest with you, my dad never had the perfect car. He never had the most expensive car in his racing career. And it just makes what he's achieved in the sport so much bigger and better, in my opinion, So for me, it was very much the same. I was on the sideline for a long time in my life, but I used those opportunities to learn more about the sport. And, if you're passionate about something like that, then definitely, you just have to be a little bit patient as well and wait for your opportunity as well in life.
And as it started to come along as well, and I hope you don't mind me going a little bit further back, you came through the vehicles with your dad. And that was a great progression as well, because you not only developed as a team and a co-driving and driver network, but you were developing the vehicles together as well until you got to, in my opinion, probably the Porter that you guys have now. But when you got it back then, that thing was the latest, greatest rock and roll. And that must have changed everything, getting into the very latest car, or close to the latest models anyway.
It definitely did. If I look back at the first car we driving, it was a Class B car, and he fondly refers to it as his little retirement car. And, that car was actually such a great vehicle to teach myself a lot about, the mechanical workings and setup of a car. Because, with that little Class B car, you're driving a 2-liter engine in that. So it doesn't give you the power to actually, go and chase down another competitor. With that, it was definitely down to driver skill and the setup. And, what I've learned from the Class B car, I definitely can take through to the Class A Porter, which, like you've correctly said, is a bit rock and roll. It's moved up a lot in kilowatts and horsepower, and we're currently running a 6-liter engine with a sequential gearbox. So it's got a lot of nice to have, and definitely a different beast than what we grew up with.
When I started working with you on the SACCS tour a couple of years back, I knew you as the co-driver, and you could see that you knew what you were talking about as well. But what I didn't know when I started to do the research for this show in particular was how much international experience you had. And I was actually blown away with how much time and experience you put in overseas. And I think that is what set you up for your next step in your career. So let's talk about some of the international stuff you went through and the opportunities that were actually afforded to you to get out there and play with the big dogs.
Yes, well, Matt, I must be honest with you. Those are probably the best days of my racing, and I've got very fond memories of my overseas and international participation. So in 2016, I entered a competition. It was the Women FIA Cross Country Motorsport Development Program. and they put out a competition for girls to enter to come to a training camp for 2 weeks in Qatar. And I was very lucky. They had about 2,000 entries into this competition. And I was selected as one of the 18 finalists to actually go to Qatar. And I must be honest with you, I didn't quite know what I was getting myself into when I went over there. But it was a 2-week, very strenuous training camp. And it was headed by Jutta Kleinschmidt. And as you guys know, Jutta's one of the only female ever to have won the Dakar. So, you know, what an incredible opportunity for this South African farm girl to actually go overseas and meet someone as amazing as her. And you know what was quite special about that is it was also under the mentorship of Michelle Mouton. And you know, after the 2 weeks there training, I emerged as one of the top 3 navigators, best navigators from the training program, and then got the great opportunity to do the Sea Line event in Qatar a few months later. So I went back over there, and we did a 5-day event, and my driver was the fantastic Cristina Gutierrez Herrero. And she was back then only 22 years old, an amazing driver. She's now, after that, the Sea Line event that we've done together, she's actually completed all 3 Dakars that she participated in. She's one of the only female drivers, you know, on the Dakar. There's only a handful full of them. So, you know, we did that event and it was tough. I'm not going to lie to you. It was 5 days of absolute only dune driving. We did at least 500 kilometers a day in the dunes. And to be honest with you, we didn't have the best car either. We had a I was going
to say, tell me about that car, because that looks like something I see that drives around Santon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was an extremely heavy Nissan Patrol there. And to be honest with you, they're definitely desert ships, as they're called. They're very, very heavy cars and vehicles that we had there. And, you know, the 2 of us bonded immediately in the car, which is also a great thing because, as you know, a navigator and a driver have to have a good relationship. You spend a lot of time in the car together. And I was lucky enough to learn a few Spanish words before the event, obviously, because Christina speaks Spanish a lot. So, you know, and the 2 of us tackled this event. And on the last day, we've managed throughout the event to get ourselves up from 54th place to around 13th place. And what was quite funny is we had 30 kilometers to go before the end, and we finally, unfortunately, got stuck in some really bad fish. And as you guys have heard, you know, fish is the worst. You really struggle to get yourself out there. And, you know, it's 45 degrees outside, which means it's about 60 to 65 degrees in the cockpit. And you can imagine we don't have an aircon like Janelle de Villiers and, you know, Nasser Alatea and those very smart boys up there. So we got dehydrated quite quickly, and now we have to dig ourselves out, you know, after a very, very long week of racing. And while I'm digging us out and using sand ladders, this Arabic man who's also racing comes to me and he asks me for a spare tire. And, you know, I was very upset. Why is he asking me for a spare tire, not actually helping, you know, pull us out or anything? And it happened to be that he's actually one of the few racing drivers overseas and ever that participates in the FIA series that are actually a deaf mute. And he couldn't explain to me what he wanted, you know, and finally I realized, okay, he's asking me for one of our tires, so I gave it to him. And, you know, what was so special after the event, after we finished in our celebrations now for making it onto the podium, he actually invited us to come to his place and, you know, have some of that famous Arabic coffee and dates and all of that. And, you know, that's something unheard for Arabic men. They're not supposed to actually, you know, engage with females at all. And they don't see them as equals. So it was such a great thing for the women in motorsport, you know, such a good opportunity for us to just show that, you know, even though it's a male-dominated sport, at the end, you know, us girls are up there with the best of them. So, yeah, very fond memories of this.
Yeah, you see, this is the whole idea of this, you know, getting to know all these other little stories, not just talking about the local races, but everything else that makes Sandra who she is, you know. And then you told me as well, then after this, all of a sudden everyone knew your name and you got invited back to come play in some other toys as well, lighter ones this time.
Thankfully, very lighter ones and very quicker ones as well. So after our race in Qatar, Nasser Alatay was very impressed with what the two of us achieved during that race. So he actually invited us to the Italian Baja with the Rally Raid team, and we went over there and we raced with them in a little Pajero. And unfortunately, Christina couldn't make it. So I was paired with Emma Gilmore, and she's a fantastic rally driver from New Zealand. Absolute brilliant skill, and such a dedicated person to motorsport there as well. And it was great going over there. And what was so special about all these international events is that it's very fortunate that my dad could come with during all of these events, and his support kind of meant a lot, having him there, and his valuable knowledge and experience just could help us. As you could see in this photo, the car wasn't as crinkle cut when we started off with it. Unfortunately, Emma and I had a little bit of a mishap there, and we rolled the car, which then led us to race the rest of the race without a windscreen. And Emma being from the rally scene and not actually being used to cross-country racing, it was quite tough for her, and a new experience for her to get wet and full of mud. And she was just such a trooper, getting back on the horse after being thrown off. And we did really well in the event. It was a great experience.
And then as your experience tended to grow, I would say in the last 10 years for cross-country racing and rally racing internationally, the word side-by-sides and SXS categories has really been key. I know the local guys tried to kind of get it going a couple of years ago, and it didn't really take. And that was probably just based on cost and the fact that development wasn't quite there. In the years, obviously the last 3 years, there's been massive local development. But quite early on, you were the ones that jumped over there and actually had a crack at the side-by-sides. I think, was it one of the Polaris races that you actually had to go at internationally?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So Emma and I was invited back to the Portugal Baja. So we went over to Portugal and we actually raced with the Extreme team there in one of those side-by-sides, Polaris. And I must be honest with you, I was very impressed with the vehicle when we drove it there. The suspension is amazing. As you've correctly said, it's extremely, extremely light. And it's a great nippy car, especially I can imagine if you drive one of those in the dunes, like during the Dakar, it would definitely be such a fun vehicle to drive. And I've been really impressed with the development that the guys have done on them since I've driven one in 2007, compared to the ones that were in the recent Dakar, especially if I think of Luc Alfond and the Red Bull one he drove recently. There's been massive development on these cars. And what's great for me about them is they're a little bit less expensive than our other cars like a T1 or even a T2, which makes it such a great way for people to actually get into racing as well. And just it's an easy car to teach you how to drive, actually.
No, I've seen those, and yeah, it's on the list. I want one. They're crazy little fun things. They look like you can ride them like motocross bikes. And when we speak to all the local guys that are racing, without taking anything away from the rest of the categories, it is the growth category. We're talking about probably when we go racing again as soon as possible, we're going to have like 10 of these things lined up, and that's going to make them the second biggest category in the lineup.
Definitely. I think we, with the introduction of those side-by-sides also now recently this year to the Special Vehicle Championship, I think it's a great incentive for people to actually head into the sport. And what's nice about them is, like you've rightly said, the guys coming over from the motorbike scene, being a little bit too old now to race bikes and worried about all those pins and in the joints, becoming stiff. It's a great way for them to still come and have some fun and join the scene. What I liked about the one we were racing is that it actually had a windscreen, which was quite nice to have for me, and a good change of scenery, actually.
Yeah, a bit of a rarity for you, especially you've kind of like always been a special vehicle lady most of the time anyway. So yeah, a windscreen for you is always a bit of a treat, a bit of a treat. Just going forward then, there's obviously one major aspect that we have to identify with, and it's not something that identifies you as a person, but the fact is you are a lady in a man's sport. And we can't kind of get away from that. You talk about the numbers of ladies. It's a very, very small percentage. So tell me about how it's affected you locally, obviously on the motorsport scene, since you've been part of the team.
Well, firstly, Matt, I've never thought of myself just as a female competitor, but I've always thought of myself as a normal competitor. So I've always prided myself that, I want to be a good competitor and not a good female competitor. So it's actually motivated me a little bit, to say that I can keep up with the guys, whether it's doing a wheel change or, replacing a side shaft. And for me, I'm definitely proud of being one of the few females. Unfortunately, I would love to see more people coming into the sport. And there's always this misconception or idea that unfortunately there's not space for a lot of female athletes in the sport, and they tend to not promote it a lot, seeing as it's a male-dominated sport. So for me, going forward, I definitely like to work on that a lot more, and work on programs like the FIA, Women in Motorsport programs, development programs. I think in South Africa, we've got such a rich racing history. And unfortunately, we haven't got a lot of female participants in that racing history. So for me, if we think about it, like you've correctly said, there were a few firsts that I've achieved. I think was the first female in South Africa to actually be awarded Protea colors for cross-country racing, and that was for navigation in cross-country racing. And it was a great thing for me to just be awarded for something, that I love doing as well. And then also definitely one of the first to participate internationally, something hopefully that will pave the way for future female racers to maybe head over to the Dakar more often and things like that. And then, if we look at the photos, some of the photos you guys were showing now, definitely a fond memory is winning the championship with my dad in 2018. It's kind of unheard of a female racer to win a championship. And I really like this. And, it's just to show you guys that we didn't have the perfect season. We didn't have perfect events. We didn't have the best car out there. But just by doing what we love and, never giving up, we actually managed to achieve something really great between the two of us. So I'm very proud of that. And what I love doing also is obviously receiving a highest place female trophy at the end of each event. But for me, it's not about the 5 minutes that you're actually on the podium and the limelight that you're getting there. It's really about the 8 hours that you spend in the car competing against other great competitors, whether they're female or male, it doesn't matter.
I need to ask you something as well, as far as you go. You talk about the physicality. I mean, I have been in a car with Evan, just kind of like goofing around, not even half a prologue. So let's call it 5 kilometers. And I've been in a car with Anthony Taylor, also on a shakedown loop, so probably 5 kilometers. I was broken and beaten after that. Like, tell me about the physical impact on not a female body, but any body in these cars. Because, I mean, it is a toxic environment.
Matt, I think that's probably one of the reasons I love cross-country racing the most, is because it's an endurance sport. To be honest with you, I've done a little bit of rally driving and I really enjoyed it. But what I didn't like is that it was over and done with. A stage was probably only 10 kilometers or 12 kilometers long, or, if it's a very long stage, 30 kilometers. So I actually really enjoy the endurance of the sport, and for me, it's tough on the body, but it's even tougher on the mind. So you have to be mentally strong to actually be able to really do well in cross-country racing. We do have a very strict fitness regime that we try and stick to. Strength training, core training is definitely up there that you have to do. But to be dead honest with you, I must be honest, I've never felt that I couldn't keep up with the guys. In actual fact, I've been making sure that I'm strong enough to pick up those very heavy 35-inch tires that we run on the Porter. And I again pride myself in being fit enough to do the sport. It's tough on the body, but like I've said, it's tougher on the mind, I think.
I hear you. Okay, so now, obviously, live on lockdown here, we're running under the colors of Total Agri. It was the beginning of 2019 when all of a sudden you guys arrived with the Porter, but looking a little bit factory fresh. So we've managed to put a little edit together of the last 2 years, and these are some of the highlights. When we come back, we'll talk about the journey and how Agri arrived on your car. Enjoy this, Sandra. And there you are on the top of the podium. Hey, how does that feel watching that footage back? You know, what's the emotions that you feel thinking about your racing journey, Sandra?
Mm. Well, Matt, I can definitely tell you after watching that video, I miss racing even more, unfortunately, now. And, you know, I just can't wait to get back in there. Before we had a look at the video, we were talking about firsts, you know, first women to receive Protea colors, first. And, you know, for me, I think my first season as a driver was definitely focused on being the first female driver in a Class A vehicle, something that we've never seen before. So, you know, I've put a lot of pressure on myself during my first season to kind of keep the Total Agri flag flying high. You know, and I've learned so much during my first season. Unfortunately, it didn't always go our way. We had a lot of mechanical woes, but you know, you have from your failures you actually learn standing up on that podium. So, you know, never take things for granted. If I look at that podium, I know how much hard work went into it behind the scenes. And, you know, for us, as having the Total Agri sponsor as one of our main sponsors, it's actually such a privilege and such a good fit. You know, if you think most of our races, we actually compete on cultivated farmlands, and we do the 500 kilometers on farmlands, you know. So the Total Agri product with lubricants specially designed for agriculture just makes sense. Another great fit for us is the fact that we drive a special vehicle. A lot of farmers are very stalwart Toyota or Ford fans, and with us having a special vehicle flying the Total Agri flag, you know, it's actually nice that we don't get involved in that manufacturer war that there always is between farmers. And, you know, for us, with my background being a veterinarian, and, you know, my dad being team manager, he's got a great farming background as well. And, you know, our head technician and mechanic, when Pete, he's actually a farmer by profession. It was such a great fit for us just to actually have the Total Agri, you know, sponsor on our car, that we really enjoyed our first season out there. We've made a lot of changes to the car since I've started driving it. You know, and we've made a lot of adjustments to the car. We've learned a lot. And as you guys can see in this picture, you know, a lot of that is due to my dad and Wimpit, and I've been really relying on all of their knowledge and their experience. And, you know, you can see we keep it a little bit lighthearted in the team. As you can look at this photo from my dad, you know, we like to play a few tricks on him now being the team manager. So, you know, we'd put stickers on his normal car instead of racing cars, and, you know, just make sure that we all keep the team, you know, upbeat and positive, and especially now during these difficult times that we're facing, you know. So that's definitely a challenge for us at this stage. So.
And it's amazing that not just friends and family, but sponsors and supporters and partners, as we like to refer to them, become friends during these processes as well. So, you know, you guys have always had I've always called him Big Chris because someone told me to call him that. I never know if it's cool to call him that, but old Big Chris Walkinshaw from Total, as well as Tanya Demner. And those guys have become like your best buddies on this journey as well. And they seem to really love what you guys are doing with this approach. And I think you're kind of like the first step in a very long marketing process that they're probably going down a road of.
No, definitely. Like you've correctly said, you know, they feel like extended family, extended racing family at the moment for us. You know, the two of them have definitely played a cardinal role in our being able to go racing, you know, especially me as a female racer. You know, they put their faith in me without me actually having a reputation or a lot of experience as a driver. And, you know, especially that first year when things were going tough, you know, they backed us 100% and saw the potential that we could have. So for me, I'm very thankful for that. And I think, you know, the two of them, especially Chris and Tanya, they bring such an interesting dynamic to the team. You know, they've got a different perspective on things, and they've got a different way of doing things. And I've learned extreme amount of great things from them, especially with marketing and, you know, promoting yourself also as a brand. It's important for us as motorsport drivers and enthusiasts to actually present yourself as a brand out there. And, you know, although a lot of us love racing, there's so much work that has to go in behind the scenes actually to get you to an event that sometimes we forget how to do that properly. So I've really enjoyed what they've helped us with, and I've really enjoyed, working as a team together with them.
And then this is going to be one of our final questions, and it gets us ready as we get myself and Ivan ready in 2 weeks' time to talk about this guy, Yucko. So I didn't even know about Yucko until about 2 years ago. And then I find out you've been married to the guy for 6 years, and he's kind of been behind the scenes. But, with Coetzee stepping out and having his health issues, and then you jumping into the driver's seat, the question was, okay, who's going to be next to you? The answer was Yucko.
Well, as you've rightly said, we've been married for almost 6 now, and before that, we're dating for a very long time. So I'm actually very fortunate to have a husband that share my love and my passion for motorsport. And I always say, I'm not sure the day that he signed our marital agreement that he actually knew what he was signing up for. But luckily for me, he's been loving, sitting next to me and supporting me in the car. A lot of people always ask me, why isn't he the one driving? Why am I the one driving? And I must be honest with you, I think it's just the fact that we're better suited the way we are now. He is an engineer, and he's very meticulous about things, and his personality definitely suits, him being a navigator better. And, I've gained a lot of experience in the car and also driving in a rally car a little bit. So it was just a natural fit for us, to get into the car together. But I must say, they always say what happens in the car stays in the car. I definitely do agree with that. But luckily for me, I've got a very good divorce lawyer on standby at each race.
So I was going to say, it doesn't come home then if... how many overshoots is a divorce,
Definitely. And I always say, he's going to have to make up with buying other girls, usually flowers or chocolates. But in our case, he usually makes up by buying me, new tires or a new steering rack or, parts for my motor car. So it's definitely quite a different relationship than what most other people would have. But in all honesty, I'm very fortunate to have him and my entire family support me through all my endeavors. And, even now, as my new role as one of the directors on the SACCS campaign as well, been very fortunate that they're supporting me there. I know I've only been in the position as a director for about 2 months now, but it's been quite an eye-opener for me as well. Usually I'm only a competitor, and I was brought up quite old school racing that I'm used to, and then luckily have experience of overseas racing and now new age racing. But it's been a tough challenge for me to learn everything behind the scenes, and hopefully going forward in that position, it's also a way for me to give back to motorsport and actually contribute positively. I didn't take the position, up quite lightheartedly. I had a really good think about becoming a director before I said yes. And one of the main reasons why I said yes is that a lot of people have a lot of opinions out there, and they have a lot of criticism towards the sport, but they never end up doing any positive to pay back to the sport. And, this was just such a great opportunity for me to actually sit down and say, what, as a competitor, I bring something new to the table. As a female racer and as quite a young director, I bring something new. And hopefully it's going to be to the advantage of all the other competitors out there.
Yeah, well, thanks for stepping up for that, Sandra. And I can only wish you, as I have already, but the best of luck with the role. And I think we're probably coming into some heavy negotiations, because everyone's asking me, asking you, asking all of us in the motorsport world, when are we going racing? And I'm not going to put you on the spot, because I know we don't have the answers at this stage. All we can do is agree that we share the same hope, and we all just want to get out there and get dirty again, man.
Yeah. Well, Matt, unfortunately, we don't know at this stage when we can go racing. But what I can promise you and everyone out there is, as soon as we get the green light, we as SACCS and also we as Team Total Agri is definitely ready to go racing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I think that's a great way to end things as we get ourselves ready for 2 weeks' time and go talk to Yucko and see what his real opinion is of what goes down in the car. But Sandra, I'll just hand across to you as well, because as we say, this is a great format and a great opportunity. We've learned so much about you, so much about the team, so much about the history. And I'd like to just hand across to you for the sign off. And if you've got anyone you'd like to thank or shout out to, this is yours.
Yeah, Matt, from my side and the Total Agri team, I'd just like to say to all our friends and family, and especially our racing community out there, please be patient. Please try and stay safe. Look after yourself and your family, especially your mental health in this troubling time. Wear a mask when you go out into public and protect yourself. And always remember to take some hand sanitizer with. Wash your hands regularly, but remember to sanitize after you've been to a shop or something like that. And, for now, just take care of yourself and stay safe.
Thank you, Sandra. An absolute pleasure to learn more about you. Come on, let's see your beautiful face. You can end off the tag there. All right, Sandra, it's been an absolute pleasure, a great journey. Thank you so much for giving us all that history and learning more about the woman behind the wheel and behind the helmet. We thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
So once again, a big thank you to Sandra. That takes us to the end of episode 2 as we get ourselves ready for episode 3. That's going to be in 2 weeks' time, where we talk to Jaco Jonk about his journey into the world of cross-country racing. But from Sandra Labuscagne Jonk and myself, Matt Smith, we'll sign off with this one. Thanks for joining us on episode number 2 of Live on Lockdown, brought to you by Total Agri.